session, so we've all come a long way. But I hope you're enjoying yourself so far, or you're about to really enjoy yourself. No pressure. I'm Dr. Patricia O'More. I'm assistant professor here in the College of Ed and teachers. Hey, none of my people are here. There we go. All right, some of my people are here, and I just want to welcome you to Athens State. And my job is to introduce Miss Sarah Crouch. She is the USA Today bestselling author of Middle Tide, a Book of the Month Club selection, a Barnes & Noble monthly pick, and one of Amazon's best books of 2024. They put it in quotes like it's sarcastic. And, just to show off a little, she is also known in the world of athletics as a professional marathon runner. So don't feel self-conscious or anything. All right. I also just want to add, Dr. Roper was just in here, and some folks were asking about a mailing list for the Writing Center, and she told me on page 31, you can directly find contact information. Also, please, if you haven't had a chance before you leave today, do sign the sign-in sheet for this session, so that we'll know how incredibly well attended this was. Thank you for being here to support Sarah today. I'm going to get out of the way.
All right. So if you all, who was here for Georgina's talk this morning? Okay, so one thing we learned is how quickly that 50 minutes goes by. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into it. So today, time permitting, we're going to be going over the novel writing craft. We're going to start with structure and pacing, writing compelling characters, how to embed universal themes in a fresh way. We're going to talk about voice and style and self-editing. Okay, so if we do have a few minutes left at the end, I would like to do a little bit of Q&A because I think that dialogue can be helpful, but if not, we may end up doing that out in the hallway afterwards. Okay. All right, so just to give a brief introduction, my name is Sarah. I live over in Madison, and it's kind of funny to me whenever, my book is introduced as the Book of the Month Club and the USA Today bestseller, because that is not at all how my career started. I endured 9 years of rejection, 8 failed manuscripts before I got to that point. And I wrote my first novel. I was 25, and I just run the Boston Marathon, and the race itself had gone fine, but I was so burnt out with running that I called my coach and I said, listen, I just really need to do something else for a minute. And to his credit, because running was what he paid me to do, he said, absolutely, take the time you need. And when you miss it, give me a call. So at that time, I had no kids. I had no other job. So I had all this time on my hands. And I thought, what if I wrote a book? Because I'd always heard that statistic that other people who start writing a book, it's only something like 2 or 3% ever, finish writing that book. So I wondered, do I have that particular brand of stamina? So the first thing I had to do was look up how long is a novel. And the answer is technically a novel becomes a novel at 50,000 words. So I thought, okay, if a novel's 50,000 words, I'm going to write 60,000. So here's my very first piece of advice. Do not do what I did. I wrote 60,000 words over the course of 10 days. It was absolute garbage. It will never see the light of day. It was not publishable, had no discernible plot, but I was hooked. And so I kept writing manuscripts, and I wrote about a book a year for the next 8 years until finally, after enduring rejection from agents and publishers, I just wasn't breaking through. And I finally realized, like, this is the definition of insanity. I'm doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. In the words of that wise old theologian Taylor Swift, I'm the problem, it's me. Okay. So I finally took the time and I looked at some of the books that were topping the bestseller list, books that had found their audience and resonated with tens of thousands of people. And I thought, okay, what is it that these books are doing right? Because obviously I'm doing something wrong. So I took the time to pick apart some of these books on a mechanical level. And the very first thing I realized was that my structure and pacing were way off. So I was writing adult novels that were in that 60 to 70,000 word range, when the truth is there's word count and then there's ideal word count. When you're writing adult fiction, in particular crime fiction, which is what I write, publishers want to see a word count closer to that 90 to 100 word, 1,000 word range. And the reason is that they know that for specific genres, a reader's going to look at a book, and if it's too thin, they're not going to assume that it's worthy of their dollar. It's not worthy of their investment. But if it's too big, then from a publishing standpoint, it's quite literally not worth the paper it's printed on. So the first thing you need to know in whatever genre you're writing, how many of you are novel writers? Is that we've gotten here today? Okay, do we have any nonfiction in here? Okay, what are the rest of y'all? What are you writing? Self-development. Self-development, yeah, what about you? You say novel?
No, social media.
Oh, social media. Okay. Yeah. All right. So it sounds like we kind of have like a diverse mix, but we are going to be talking mostly about novels. So knowing the ideal word count for your genre is very, very important. So if you're writing adult fiction like crime fiction, that 90 to 100,000 words is exactly where you want to be. If you're writing young adult, that 60 to 80,000 words is great. Now, if you're writing fantasy, those readers like a big thick book. They'll pick up a book that's like 120,000 words plus. But basically, once you know the ideal like word length for your book. So for me, I was looking at a 90,000 word book. Okay, so I said that's the first thing I need to do. I need to make my book longer. Now, every book that you write, regardless of the genre, is going to follow this pattern. Okay, we have our conflict here. We have our resolution over here. Okay, so this looks like different things in different genres. If you're writing romance, single here, in love over here, okay? If you're writing crime fiction, dead body at the beginning, killer caught at the end, right? Okay, so whatever genre you're writing, this is generally the timeline you're gonna do. So when you're looking about, okay, how do I plot my book? How do I structure it? Okay, you've got your word count. Now there's also an ideal chapter length for books too, and that tends to be between 1,500 and 2,500 words. Okay, the reason for this is that anything too much shorter, it's not really enough time for the reader to sink into the action. Anything too much longer, and you're going to be dealing with reader fatigue. You've just been sitting in a scene for too long. Are there exceptions to this? Absolutely. Chris Whittaker wrote All the Colors of the Dark, one of the best books, in my opinion, that came out last year. It has about 2 million chapters, and they're all about this big. Okay, there are exceptions, but he is Chris Whittaker. So the first thing you need to know about publishing is that it is a bottleneck, okay? By its nature, it has to be. Agents and publishers are so inundated with manuscripts all the time that they will look for any reason to say no to you, okay? So the very least you can do is get the logistical stuff right. You want to give them no other reason to say no to you, but that your writing sucks, okay? That should be the only reason a publisher says no to you. So if you're looking at a 90,000 word book and you say, okay, roughly 2,000 words a chapter, that's 45 chapters. So then you know you're going to space your action out from here to here over the course of roughly 45 chapters. Again, you want to hold that kind of in a loose hand, not in a closed fist, okay? Because you're going to have some chapters that are, by their nature, they're going to be longer. And then, of course, along the way, your action's going to do this, or it's going to do this, or the, what did you call it earlier?
EKG.
Yeah, the EKG. It's going to do this, right? Okay. But as long as you've got your basic, okay, I'm keeping my chapters kind of within that word range. I'm keeping my book. I'm not going to write a 200,000 word book. Once you've kind of got it figured out, okay, so we've got conflict resolution. We've got our structure here. So let's drop some compelling characters in. I want you guys to tell me, what are some of the protagonists that have stuck out with you? Maybe it's a book you read as a kid. You're like, oh man, I felt like I knew that protagonist. Give me a protagonist that stuck out to you over the years, okay? Anybody, throw one out to me.
Percy Jackson.
Okay, let me write that down. Okay, we've got Percy Jackson. Okay. Percy J. All right, since we just talked about All the Colors of the Dark, I'm going to write down Patch, because that's one that stuck with me. Another.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, excellent. Okay. Okay, let's see some female protagonists, please.
Nancy.
Katniss Everdeen! There we go, Katniss. Okay. Nancy Drew. That's good. I'm just going to put Drew for that. All right.
Violet Sorrenfeld.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, Finch.
Yes. Okay. Okay. What do these people have in common? I can think of maybe one that falls outside the realm, but what do these protagonists have in common? What are you laughing about? What is
I know which one falls outside there.
It's Nancy Drew. I'm going to spoil out right now.
The underdog or something?
They
We're rooting for them.
why?
An underdog.
Want them, they seem.
They are relatable because they are flawed. Okay. Another big fun one for me is I'm going to say Anne of Green Gables here. I'm going to put that one up there. So I think about this, not just, sometimes you do see actual physical flaws. Okay, Patch is missing an eye. Anne of Green Gables has fiery red hair that she hates, but most of them have emotional, mental flaws, trauma. You have Katniss, who is kind of cold and unforgiving in a lot of ways. We have characters who are flawed. So that is obviously super, super important. The very first thing you should do when designing your main character is make sure they have a significant flaw, because that makes them relatable to the reader. Why? Because readers are flawed. We are flawed as human beings, okay? So another thing you need to look at with your characters is internal tension. Okay, that's what keeps readers flipping pages. So another two things you need to know about your characters, okay? You need to know what a character wants and what they need, and those should not be the same thing. Okay, what does Frodo want? He wants to get the ring to Mordor and destroy it in fires of Mount Doom. But what does Frodo need? He needs to understand that he can't bear the burden alone and accept Sam's help and friendship. Okay, what he wants and what he needs are not the same thing. Make sure you know that for your characters, and they should not be the same thing. Okay, now when I think about the characters that have really stuck with me over the years, the ones that I'm like, damn, that was an interesting protagonist, it is the ones whose wants and needs are actually vastly at odds. I think of someone like Edmond Dantes from the Count of Monte Cristo. What did he want? He wanted revenge on the people who had sent him to the Chateau d'If, this prison on a rock in the middle of the ocean for 13 years. He wanted revenge on those people. But what did he need? He needed to forgive those people because his desire for vengeance was poisoning him from the inside out. We have wants, we have needs, and they are doing this. And that is very, very interesting. That creates a lot of internal conflict. And along with your external conflict and resolution, you also have that internal conflict and resolution that will keep the reader going, and it's going to lace them very tightly to your character. Okay. Okay. So also with a lot of these characters, again, Nancy drew aside, most of these characters are not wholly good or wholly evil. Okay. So I think of a book that, again, a big bestseller that knocked it out of the park this year was The God of the Woods. How many of you read that? A couple, not many. Okay. I would recommend it. It's a pretty good book. Liz Moore, she's very, very good at doing this. She kind of asked the question, do we even need a protagonist? Because she had this huge, vast cast of characters, and they were all so morally gray. They were not wholly good or wholly evil. And because of that, it really influenced the actions, and it went back and forth between characters. And you really didn't have anyone that stood out as like, this person's the hero. And in a way, that's okay. So when you have morally gray characters, so let's say you have, I'm going to think of a good example. Where the Crawdads Sing. How many of you have read that one? Okay, quite a few more. Okay, that's a great example. Kaya. By the end of the book, you figure out she is the killer. I'm sorry. If you read the end of the book, I don't know what to tell you. I just spoiled it. I'm so sorry. It's your fault. It's been a while. But truly, you get to the end of that book, you find out that she is the killer. She did it. She's the bad guy, and you do not care. You're on her side anyway. You know, and that's because she is not wholly good. She's not wholly evil, but she's so relatable. And the thing is, this should go for your antagonists as well. They should not be one-note villains. Give your villains human, justifiable reasons for the bad things that they do. Okay, and this becomes all the easier when you have, you know, morally gray characters. Like, let's say you have a victim, for instance. Let's say our victim is an architect, and we open on him. He is found dead in his home. He's a pillar of the community, and everybody loves him, and he's brilliant, and he was up and coming. But we find out halfway through the book that he had gotten this contract to design this big government building, and he was actually planning to put bombs in this building and blow it up because he wanted to show it to the government. Okay, all of a sudden, because he's morally gray, our antagonist, whoever killed him, becomes a lot more relatable because it was an act of preemptive justice. Okay, so if you can balance that morally gray between your protagonist and your antagonist, that is how you write compelling drama. Don't steal that. I'm going to write that someday. Okay. All right. So we've got some characters who are neither wholly good nor wholly evil. Now, here's the thing you're going to find out really quick when you get published is that everybody wants to talk about themes. They want to know what's the theme. How many of you have been in a book club? Okay. I'm sure you all talk about themes every single time you meet, right? That's a big one, right? So I'm going to shout out some books. Again, we're focusing on bestsellers today, the big blockbuster books. And I want you to tell me what you think some of the themes are in these books, okay? The Hunger Games. Let's hear some themes from the Hunger Games. Give me a word that you think is a theme of that book. I will start. One of the themes in that book is survival.
Yes.
Okay.
Haves and have
Control.
The have and have nots. Yeah, I like that. Oh yeah, control. Yes.
Reflection.
What's that?
Reflection.
Reflection. Okay. I'm going to also add freedom from oppression. Okay. Okay. All right. Harry Potter. Themes. Found family. Perfect. Yes.
Misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Friendship.
Yes. I'm also going to add to this one Good old fashioned good versus evil. Okay. Okay. Great Gatsby.
Relationships.
Ambition? What was that? Ambition? Ambition, yes. Also for that one, I'm gonna say corruption and materialism.
Morality.
Yes. Also, I'm not gonna write this, it's too long, but the decline of the American dream is a pretty strong theme in that book. Okay, Pride and Prejudice, this one's real easy, 2 of them are in the title. Pride and Prejudice, very good. There's a couple more in that one, let's hear them.
Materialism. Classism.
I'm also gonna add, I don't know if it's up there yet, just love. Love is a pretty big theme in that book, marriage. Okay, so how do we take some of these, man, my handwriting's terrible. Can you all even read that? Okay. All right, so how do we take some of these great big universal themes and make them fresh? One of the things we have to do is we have to look at themes from new angles, okay? So maybe instead of writing a book about falling in love, we write a book about what happens when love is inconvenient or even destructive. Colleen Hoover, say what you want about her, the woman can write a bestseller, and she does that one very, very well. She takes love as a main theme and finds ways to flip it on its head. What about, instead of freedom from oppression, you talk about how people abuse freedom once they get it? Okay, I'm not going to give you much homework for today, but the one thing I do want you to do is go home, write a 3,000 to 5,000 word short story. Pick one of these themes that we have up here and find a way to flip it on its head. Okay, that's my homework for you. If you want to, I'm going to leave my email. You can send it to me. I would love to read it. Okay. All right, so we've got structure, we've got some characters, we've got some themes. So let's talk about the actual writing. All right, so what author's writing? If I were just to give you a book, let's say it just looked like this, it had no title, no cover, no author. If you opened it, you would know their writing instantly. What writer is that writer for you?
Agatha Christie.
Agatha Christie. Okay, I want you to, let me erase this real quick.
Jane.
Okay, so first of all, with Agatha Christie, give me an adjective or two that you would use to describe her writing. How would you describe Agatha Christie's writing? Anybody? Adventurous. Okay, what was the other author I heard someone shout it out? Okay, and how would you describe? Give me a couple adjectives.
Traumatic, dramatic, ghetto love.
I love that. Okay. If I say Cormac McCarthy, what adjectives come to mind? Depressing. Fair. I'm also going to add for him, he's very sparse. He's very gritty. Yeah, gritty. All right, what about Toni Morrison?
Pain.
Pain, but I'm going to say also there's a lot of beauty there. She's very poetic. Yes. And how would you describe, give me a couple adjectives?
Danielle Steele.
How would you describe Danielle Steele?
Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking, okay.
Eric Jerome Dickey.
And give me an adjective?
Sexy.
Another one that I'd say is pretty recognizable to me is Taylor Jenkins Reid. She's kind of a more modern author. I'm going to say her writing is very intimate. It's casual. It's confessional. Okay. This is voice. And it is the single most powerful tool that you have as a writer. So how do we develop it? The first way we develop it should be very obvious. Someone hit me. What do you think is the first way we use to develop our voice? Right. I heard it somewhere. Yes. This should be very, very obvious. Now listen, y'all, the 10,000 hour rule, I don't think it applies to everything in life. I think it's pretty dang close for writing. I like to think of it sometimes as, I'm sure you've all heard about, Michelangelo carving the statue of David out of this big block of marble, and someone asked him how he did it. And he's like, well, I just chipped away everything that wasn't David. Okay, so it's like, and that took years for him to carve this statue. And I think about that. Voice is a lot like that. When you start out writing, I think about that first novel I wrote. It is unrecognizable to the voice that I write with today, but that doesn't mean it was worthless, because all those novels that I wrote that will never be published, they'll never see the light of day, they are the foundation that I stand on today. That's how I develop my voice. And if someone walked in 5 years in when he was carving that statue of David, it still would not have looked good. It still would have looked like a lump of marble, but that doesn't mean he was doing it wrong. Okay, it takes a really long time to develop a voice. For me, it took about 1 million written words, 1 million words worth of manuscripts before I finally felt like, I found my voice. What's the second way we develop our voice? Living authentically, I think is important. Yes. Yeah, being honest in our writing. That's not as easy as it. No. Okay, so reading. I hear this a lot. A lot of authors, their number one advice to writers is read, read, read. I don't think that's the right advice. I think that's like telling someone who wants to be a professional big bodybuilder, okay, you just need to eat. If that person goes around and around in the drive-thru at McDonald's, they're not going to get any stronger, are they?
No.
Stop putting trash in your head.
Yeah.
Okay? Read well. If you want to write like Chris Whitaker, read Chris Whitaker. If you want to write like Daphne du Maurier, read Daphne du Maurier. Whether you like it or not, the stuff that you put in your head influences your writing. It has more of an influence on your writing than any single other factor in your entire life. What you read is going to affect your writing, so please be deliberate and read well. A third way that we develop our voice is that we experiment. It's very, very common, and then myself included, to start writing a certain way and to change somewhere along the way. I think when I first started writing, I wrote almost exclusively in first person. And somewhere along the way, I changed, and now I write exclusively in third person. This is very, very common. Did that happen to you, Georgina, out of curiosity?
Yeah, or I change back and forth.
Change back and forth, yeah. So experimentation is very, very important in writing. And Georgina and I were having a laugh about this in the bathroom a few minutes ago, but you should also be experimenting with genre. The first 3 books that I wrote, just to throw these out at you, the first one was an angsty romance set on the coast of Maine. The second was a sci-fi based on a dream I had. I wish I'm kidding, but I am not. The third one was a historical novel set on a peach plantation in Depression era Georgia. It took me a long time to figure out what it was that I wanted to write, till I finally landed in my genre. So you should be experimenting. You should be writing a lot. You should be reading a lot of good books. And you should be experimenting with what it is that you actually want to write, okay? All right, so once you've got it down, you've got your manuscript out, let's talk about how to take that. It's called a rough draft for a reason. Let's talk about how to take that rough draft and turn it into something special, okay? So, all right, we're going to talk about self-editing our work here. So first, the number one thing, and then this, I don't agree with Stephen King on absolutely everything in the craft, but the one thing I do agree with him on wholeheartedly is that distance is the best editor that you have, okay? So when you finish with a manuscript, the best thing you can do is to take that manuscript and put it in a drawer and forget about it. He recommends about 6 weeks, I think. I think at the bare minimum, you should put it away for at least 2 weeks, okay? Try not to look at it. It's incredibly difficult to do this. But when you finish a manuscript, if you can tuck it away, forget about it for a little while, and then go back to it, that'll give you a chance to step out of the tree so you can see the actual forest. Okay, that's where you can finally identify, here's some of the great big developmental issues that are not working with this novel. Because the thing is, you are the one person on planet Earth who will never have the luxury of opening your manuscript purely as a reader. You cannot do it. And you get to a point as a writer where you've just been smelling the perfume for too long and you just can't see it. But there are certain things with editing especially that everyone should be looking out for. Okay, so the first thing you should be looking out for when you are editing your work. All right, adverbs. Okay, is there a time and place for a good adverb? Yes. You will never get rid of all of them. That is not possible, but you should get rid of as many adverbs as you can, particularly the ones that come after dialogue tags. She said quietly. He declared angrily. Quietly, angrily. Get rid of them. You need to trust your characters and your dialogue to do the heavy lifting. Trust that readers will figure it out. If you have 2 characters who are walking through a haunted house looking for a killer, you don't need to say that she said it quietly because she would be whispering in a haunted house looking for a killer, okay? You need to let your characters be pulling the machinery here. And adverbs, it's not that they're lazy, it's just that writing is less powerful when it's littered with adverbs, okay? So as many, and again, some are gonna sneak through, that's just part of writing, they are gonna be there, but if you can get rid of as many adverbs as possible, I think it will make you a more powerful writer. Okay, next one, I'm gonna write out a sentence and I want you to tell me where the trouble word is, okay? Okay, let's see. All right. Eric heard the floor creak and he froze. Okay, what's the problem? Eric heard. Heard, right there, what is that? That is called a filtering verb. What does a filtering verb do? It creates a degree of distance between your character and your reader that is not necessary. I'm going to write down some filtering verbs because I want you guys to delete as many of these as possible. So, saw, heard, felt, noticed, realized. I feel like I'm missing a big one. Thought. No, anticipated. So again, it's the same thing with adverbs. There are going to be times where it's necessary to use a filtering verb, but here's a better way to phrase this sentence, okay? The floor creaked behind him, period. Eric froze. Okay, do you see the difference here? Much more direct. Okay, so this right here, you're getting out of your character's head and you're reminding your reader that this is a story and you are not this person. This person heard this. Instead of, you're right here, you're in the action. Okay, so filtering verbs, these, get rid of as many of these as you possibly can in your writing. Find ways to phrase it more actively because you want your reader, particularly in crime fiction, but in any genre, you want them to be as tightly laced to the character as humanly possible, and that's how you do that. Okay. Other words that you should probably be getting rid of when you go through that path and you're editing your book. Began, beginning to, started to. Instead of saying she started to smile, she smiled. Again, just unnecessary words here. So began, beginning to, and started to. Those are other things you want to get rid of. All right. Another thing you want to be doing is varying your sentence length. Okay. Ernest Hemingway had plenty of 300-word sentences, but he also had 2- and 3-word sentences. Okay. Varying the length of your sentences is one really big way to keep your writing interesting, to keep it fresh, to keep the reader guessing. And again, it avoids that, that reader fatigue. Okay. So once you've done what you can and you pulled out the words that need to be pulled out, getting your work into the hands of someone else is crucial, but you also need to be having them give you the right feedback here. So the biggest thing I think when I have beta readers, I have 2 beta readers that I use, and they're both authors. And the one thing I ask them when I give them a manuscript, I say, please mark up anywhere where you were confused and anywhere where you were bored. Okay. So anywhere that they were confused, that's going to tell you where you need to be maybe changing things developmentally. That's going to give you the big picture, like, oh, this wasn't making sense to them because I didn't sort it out in the plot early on enough, you know. And then anywhere where they are bored, that tells you where you need to cut. I would say 90% of writers are overwriters. I tend to be an underwriter. When I finish a manuscript, it's usually a little bit too short and I need to add, but I'd say 90% of people tend to write. They're a little baggy. You have the sagging middle of a book and they need to cut. And those are great places to cut is when a reader tells you they're bored. Don't send it to your mom. That's the first thing that I do. I always give my books out because my mom is the first one to read them and she loves them and that's great and it's completely unhelpful. Okay, so you need to get it into the hands of someone who is maybe doesn't care about you as much. They're a little bit objective and you can tell them exactly what to be looking for. Because if you just give them a manuscript and say, tell me your thoughts, they're going to want to be nice. But if you say, please, it's crucial to me, point out where you were bored and where you were confused, they will do that. And that is very, very, very helpful. Okay, so in implementing all these changes into my writing, I sat down to write middle type. So for the first time, I had been a pantser. I had written all those first 8 books by the seat of my pants. I never plotted anything. And when I went down to write Middle Tide, creating that plot to where I knew, okay, I'm going to have roughly this number of chapters, and I know I need to spread my action out. It was kind of like having the skeleton that hangs in like a science classroom, right? It's like I had the bones in place. So when it came time to write a chapter, I was crafting a muscle, but I already knew what it looked like and where it was supposed to go and what its function was supposed to be. And when you have your plot, for me, it ends up being about an 8 or 9 page Word document where I have chapter by chapter, here's what's going to happen all throughout the book. You're through a lot of those great big developmental edits before you even start writing the book. So that was tremendously helpful. I plotted the book and that took probably 3 or 4 weeks maybe. And then because of that, the actual writing of the book was a 3-month process. It just, boom, it was like that. Because I already had figured out what I was going to say and what was going to happen. And it was so natural. Now, I know someone like Stephen King does not plot, and he often describes, okay, the first draft is where you unearth the fossil, you unearth the story, and then the second draft is where you make it sing. But to me, plotting is just as efficient of a way to unearth that fossil, and then it saves you a draft in the long run, because you can go basically right into your second draft because you've sorted out all the developmental issues. So I plotted the book, and then I sat down and I wrote the book, and then when it came time to send it out, I'd gone, at this point, it had been 9 years, and usually the pattern was, okay, finish a manuscript, write that query letter that we talked about earlier, where you have the, you introduce your novel and you send out a few sample pages. And then for me, it was like, okay, wait a month or 2. And then all of a sudden the inbox would start filling up with rejections, just no, until I'd exhausted all my options and I had to write another book. But this time, having implemented all of these things in place, all of these things that I gleaned from books that had made it, I implemented all these things into Middle Tide, and within 2 weeks, I had 9 offers of representation from agents, and it sold to Simon & Schuster 2 weeks later in a mid-6-figure deal. It made a difference. And this is now, I will never go back to not plotting. I will never go back to not thinking about these things in my writing, because it honestly made such a big difference. So that's always the advice that I give people is, if you're at a place in your writing where you've been doing it for a really long time and you're just not seeing results, you might be the problem. And it doesn't mean your writing sucks. I look back, my voice was rough and things have changed, but I don't think my writing actually sucked. I just think I hadn't taken the time to pick apart books on that mechanical level and really figure out why they worked. And these are some of the reasons why they work. Okay. So we want to be implementing themes. We want to be, having characters that are compelling and not wholly good or wholly evil, but most of all, honestly, the biggest writing advice in the world is write what you know. So after 9 books of writing that sci-fi based on a dream I had and the angsty romance and all that, I had to sit down and think, okay, what is it I actually know? And I realized I know the woods of the Pacific Northwest. I know those woods the way that you probably know your childhood home better than the house you live in today. Because when you're a kid, you know the way the carpet feels on your cheek, and you see faces in the textured ceiling, and you know the way the wood grain feels under your fingertips. That's the way the kids explore the woods. And for me, we never had a lot of money growing up. We had this tiny little house, but there was 80 acres of pristine Washington wilderness behind it. So when it came time to write Middle Tide, I thought, okay, I know the woods of the Pacific Northwest, And then I also wanted to write a main character. His name is Elijah. When the book really fully opens, Elijah is 33 and he is lost. And when I wrote that book, I was 33 and I was lost. I had just had 2 kids in quick succession, and a lot of women have like postpartum depression or anxiety. I had insomnia so bad that I would go stretches of 60, 70, 80 hours a week, or 80 hours in a row without sleep. And when you stop sleeping like that, you cannot run the 120, 130 miles a week that it takes to be one of the country's best marathoners. So I reached a point where I wasn't ready to give up my running, but it felt like my running had walked away from me. And so I wanted to pour that into this main character. So when we meet Elijah Lee, he's 33 years old, and he has given his dream, his life, his 20s to this dream of being the next great American novelist. He has moved to San Francisco and poured his 20s into writing this book called Middle Tide. And by the time he's 30, it's gotten published, but it sold less than 50 copies, and it is absolutely flopped. And he returns home to this town in the Pacific Northwest. He's just out of money, out of motivation, and he is trying to regain his purpose by restoring this land that he was raised on. And so, he's just starting to sort of get his feet underneath him again when a woman in the town that he has kind of a tumultuous past with is found murdered on the property in a crime exactly like the one he wrote about in his crime novel Middle Tide. So the rest of the story is kind of untangling the threads of who could be framing him for such a specific murder. So I knew I wanted to write that murder. I wanted to write a murder mystery, but I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted it to be coming of age, and I wanted there to be a love story. And that's why, I think it's important to be experimentative with also with your structure. I wanted to write a dual timeline. So what we have is in a book like this, we have, the present day timeline, which is the crime investigation. And we have these chapters sprinkled in, and then you have a slower coming of age timeline weaving up from the 1970s to the 1990s of Elijah's slower coming of age. But by keeping these chapters in the middle of this, you're able to keep the tension of a crime novel, but you're able to make it so much more than that by expanding it into this second timeline. So that's also advice too, is if you want to write something that's bigger than just one genre, if you want to write a novel, I think, the novel to me that I feel like does that best is the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. How many of you have read that book? So that book to me, it's so revolutionary, so ahead of its time, because she said, yes, this is a murder mystery, but it is also a love story. It is also coming of age in a way. And there is also her writing is like the most literary writing that you could ever possibly imagine. So being willing to experiment with something different, like a timeline like this, that is saying, okay, I'm not going to tell this story from A to B. I'm going to really expand what I'm trying to do here. I think that can be very, very powerful, and it can allow more room for your novel to breathe. And even with all of that, the novel still came in at 91,000 words. It was not a massive novel. So it's definitely okay to do that. It's okay to experiment. And that's, again, another reason why I recommend plotting, is because I sorted those two timelines out way before I even wrote chapter 1. And that was very, very important. All right, I see we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, 11 minutes.
Okay. I actually want to, since we have a little bit of time here, I want to open it to Q&A. I'm just going to pull a chair up and sit. Because I want to be able to answer. And please feel free to ask me anything. I'm an open book. Haha. Yeah, feel free to ask me anything. I would love to be able to dialogue with you guys, or if you have any like troubleshooting questions about your own novels, let's do that now. Yeah. Yes.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So you referenced two timelines.
Yes.
And you plotted the entire story out. Did you do timeline A as kind of one set of work, timeline B as one set of work, and then you integrate those into the overall plot? I'm just curious how the plot evolved from the two separate timelines.
Great question. I did not, but I know authors who do. Where the Crawdads Sing, she wrote those in two separate timelines and integrated them together. So I know that that's a popular way to do it. I did not. For me, I found it. I feel not that it was easier, but I feel like it was just as seamless because I plotted it, because I saw them all together. If I felt like something was wrong or out of place, it was just as simple as copy and paste. So I was able to sort it out. But once I did get it all out, I did quite a bit of those moving around. It was a blueprint, but I said, oh man, like I have the second story here. Like it was moving stuff around from that point of view. And maybe there'd be less of that if I had written them separately, but that's a very good question. I assume you can do it. You can do it either way, whatever. That's all I can read. Yeah.
Do you find when you said you plotted it out, do you do like chapter 1, this person's perspective in like a sentence or two, and then go like all the way out
So
like that, and then, or do you write more than that?
So there, and it just, again, this is where writing is just so subjective, because I know there are authors who write like 30,000 word synopsises where they are basically writing a draft of like, here's everything that's happening. For me, I like at least a sentence or two, but they're very dry. You're not going to see it's not going to live and breathe the way the novel was. You're not going to see the heart of your
What
character.
happened, period.
Yeah, but very,
like
action. And even sometimes I'll take like notes to myself of like, okay, we have been out of touch with the setting. So for this chapter, make this a very atmospheric opening. It's raining, reflect the characters, grows
write notes like that in there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for me. Yeah, because no one else is going to see that,
Did you
Actually,
ever
that's great.
end up with that still in there when you're printing it up?
Sometimes, I mean, honestly, like when you write a book, it's usually not as simple as just pushing the cursor along. It gets messy, and there's notes in there about, and then things get shuffled. But yeah, no, I do. Yeah, just plain old notes to myself of, oh, this isn't working. Go back and fix this later. Things like that. Yeah, great question. Was there another question over here? Okay. Yes.
How do I find my character's internal conflict and goals?
I mean, you have to create them. But honestly, I feel like we all have internal conflict and we all have goals. So again, write what you know, draw from what you know. And especially, I know you and I talked a little bit earlier, if you're writing, fantasy and young adult, it's like you are a young adult. and you know what it feels like to be going through this age of your, of your life. And I feel like, granted, you're not gonna have the same exact conflict as your characters, but, I think about the way that I poured my heartache into Elijah. It was very real, it was very honest. And that's the best thing you can do, is just make your characters as honest as possible. I don't always recommend making them autobiographical. Number one, because when the book does get published and people hate your main character, it hurts a whole lot more. But I think honestly, like drawing from your own personal life, but then also, again, it's reading good books, and you've read enough good books to know what works. And also, as someone said it earlier, but reading bad books, it is helpful in one way, in that it shows you what doesn't work. If you can identify, man, this person they just showed up on the page and everything was 100% okay in their life, your character should pretty much start at rock bottom. They kind of should, because they need to be able to dig themselves out of that hole. So starting your character in a low place and working their way out is a good formula. But as far as like actually what's happening, the actual conflict, that's where your imagination and the alchemy kicks in. Yeah. There was one other person over here. Yes. Mhm.
How do you know when your chapter has too much like complexity or too much conflict? Because I know you have like your overall, then each chapter you want something. How do you know when you have too much?
Okay. So yeah, and that's tough. That's something that you probably won't know until you've had that distance from the manuscript and you go in and you read it. You're like, there's way too much going on right here. As you're writing it, you probably will not know. But if you have good, like someone who's willing to read your work that you trust, say, I sense that there's too much going on here. Please let me know your thoughts. That can be really helpful. But honestly, yeah, that's where distance comes in, because all you have is your ear and everything you've ever read. So it's like if you sense that like, oh man, something's going on, or like I've got too much going on in this particular section, then you probably do. Like that is your ear. That's everything you've ever read telling you this isn't working. And it's hard because sometimes we know it's not working, but we can't figure out why. And that's where it's helpful to have someone else's honest feedback come in. Yeah.
How did you find a beta reader?
Very good question. So I'm not, I think it's weird because I'm giving this talk, but I'm actually not very extroverted. So I don't, it's difficult for me to like reach out to someone and be like, will you read my manuscript? I think the first one was actually, there's this woman named Kimmy Cunningham Grant, who's a writer. She wrote just a couple of books that like they blew my mind with how good they were. And I remember I just like reached out, because every now and then you can reach out to authors on Instagram. I hadn't realized, but I just sent a message like, hey, I just really loved your book. And she wrote back and we started talking. She found out I was a writer, and I just asked. I just like, one day I was like, it was stomach turning. I was like, would you mind? And she did. And we've been reading each other's work ever since, and it's been a very beneficial relationship. But it takes that first step, and it's scary.
Yeah.
But honestly, like that's to me is, especially when it's someone they can write and you trust their work, then you're like, their feedback is going to be invaluable on your manuscript. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're doing great. She's like, you can tell, marathon runner, right?
Yeah. Talk fast, so we're gonna be fine. Yeah. Yes.
Can you determine percentage of action versus percentage of dialogue? I mean, if you get too heavy in one or.
You can, yeah. So, and this is going to depend heavily on the genre of the book or style. That is going to vary so much, because there are books that are really dialogue heavy and they still work. And then there's other books where the main character is in a cabin alone in the woods and you get to know them through negative space and what they're not saying. So that's just very specific to what it is that you're writing. But again, I think if red flags are going off in your head, if you're 14 pages in and all they've done is talk, and you're like, this might be too much, it's probably too much. So yeah, and when you have sections like that, when you're working through a manuscript, you're like, I wonder if this is too dialogue heavy, flag that section. And when you send it out, when you find a reader and have someone be like, hey, this is my thought, let me know if you agree, or because they may come back and be like, no, this is totally fine, it works for me. Yeah, sometimes if dialogue is good, I could read a whole lot of it. But if it's bad, no. So yeah. Other questions?
Have you
Yes.
ever read The House on the Strand?
Oh yes, of course. I think I've read pretty much everything Daphne du Maurier has ever written. It's very funny because she's very macabre, and we think of like The Birds, we think of that as an Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's a Daphne du Maurier story. Yeah, so she's actually my desert island writer. And it's just funny because this is such a subjective. I gave a talk like this at a library and someone's like, oh, I hated Rebecca. And it broke my heart because that is my desert island book. Like I could read every time like November, December rolls around, it gets stormy. I just want to crack it open and live in it like an old piece of furniture. It's great. But again, subjective business. Yeah. Were there any last questions? We have a couple more minutes. Yeah.
When you were talking, since we were talking about dual narratives, have you ever read A Long Walk to Water?
No. Who wrote that?
I don't remember, but It's actually based partly, well, part A, the story A is partly a true story, and the part B is it's kind of a true story, but the main character of part B is not real.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I forgot what.
My mind is saying it was like Fight Club, but it's probably nothing like Fight Club. Will you tell me the name of that again?
A long walk to walk.
That sounds good. If you recommend it, anytime people are like, hey, I have a good book, I always want to write it down.
It's by Linda Sue Park, I think.
Is that right?
Yes.
What is it?
Nice. Y'all need to talk. Okay. A long walk to water. Okay. Is there any last questions I can get to? Okay. Wow, I think we're 2 minutes early. We did it. Great job. Well done. Thank you so much. Well done. Okay.
Run.
All right, girl.
And by Robert Bailey,
You're done.
you're right here. If you would like to go, learn about